There's nothing like a crisis to lay bare the structure of your life. I got sick and my family showed me just how little they cared about me. So I ran away. Let me tell you what happened. The risotto took 45 minutes. I want you to understand that. 45 minutes of standing at the stove, stirring, adding stock ladle by ladle, watching the heat, adjusting, tasting. Arborio rice doesn't forgive distraction. You have to be present for it. You have to care. Ray ate it in 11 minutes. I counted. He was on his phone for 9 of them. Good, he said, pushing back from the table. Not great. Not thank you. Not how was your day, Simone. Good. The same word you'd use for a gas station sandwich? I cleared his plate, covered the leftovers, wiped the stove. This was a Tuesday. This was just a Tuesday. I had been Ray's wife for 4 years and his caretaker for about the same amount of time, though nobody called it that. They called it being a good wife, being family, being the kind of woman who holds things together. I called it man-keeping. I made the meals. I kept the house. When his parents, Dave and Marion, showed up unannounced on a Sunday, and they always showed up unannounced on Sundays, as if our home was a restaurant with an open kitchen policy, I produced a proper dinner from whatever was in the refrigerator, and I smiled while I did it. When Angie, Ray's sister, grew tired of her own children, which happened with reliable frequency, she drove them to our house and left them in the front hall like packages requiring a signature. "Just a couple hours," she'd say, already walking back to her car, her heels on the driveway, the door not quite closed behind her. Her kids were fine. Luca was 7, headstrong and curious. Mia was 4, still soft at the edges. I didn't mind the children. I minded being furniture. I had been making myself useful for so long that I had nearly forgotten there was any other way to be. Angie called on a Thursday afternoon in March, and I knew from the particular brightness in her voice that she needed something. "Simone, how are you? How are you?" "I'm fine, Angie." Good, good. So, you know Mia's birthday is Saturday." "I know. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be so special if you made that lemon cake? The one with the lavender buttercream? The kids go absolutely crazy for it." I stood in the kitchen. The afternoon light was coming in flat and gray. I had a grocery list on the counter and a work deadline on Friday and a low, persistent ache at the back of my throat that I'd been ignoring for 2 days. "When did you want it for?" I asked. "Saturday. The party's at 2, so I guess if you could have it over by noon?" She didn't ask if I was busy. She didn't ask if Saturday worked. She told me the timeline. "I'll see what I can do," I said. That was Thursday. By Friday morning, the ache at the back of my throat had moved into my chest, behind my eyes, down into my bones. By Friday afternoon, I was in bed with a fever of 102. The flu hit me like a verdict. I don't get sick often. I don't have the luxury. When you are the person who does everything, illness reads as a character failure, a lapse in personal management. So I fought it for a day, pushing through, making Ray's dinner with watering eyes and a body that felt packed with wet sand. Saturday morning I couldn't get up. I texted Angie, "I'm sick. Really sick. I can't make the cake. I'm so sorry." She didn't respond. Ray came into the bedroom around 10, dressed, keys in his hand. "I'm heading to the hardware store." I looked at him from the pillow. "Ray, I have a fever." "I know. You'll probably just want to sleep. I need ibuprofen. Can you stop at the drugstore on your way back?" He did something with his face, a small rearrangement. "I was going to head straight to the hardware store. It's on the other side of town." "Ray, ibuprofen. I'll be back in a couple hours. You can order something." He left. I heard the front door close. I lay there with the ceiling pressing down on me and thought, this is interesting. This is a very interesting piece of information. By Sunday, I was no better. My fever had stabilized at 101. I had been eating crackers and whatever I could reach, and the ginger ale I'd ordered by delivery along with the ibuprofen Ray had not bought. Dave and Marion arrived at 2 in the afternoon. I heard them in the hallway, heard Ray's voice, heard the particular resonance of his mother's laugh. No one came to the bedroom for 20 minutes. When Marion finally knocked, she stood in the doorway with her coat still on. "You're not well," she said. "No. Have you eaten?" A little. She looked at me with something that was shaped like concern but felt like assessment. Well, we made plans. We're taking Ray for an early dinner. You'll be all right here? She was already half turning when she said it. I could use some soup, I said. I didn't plan to say it. It just came out, plain and honest, the way things do when you're sick and your defenses are down. From the place on Clement Street, they have that chicken congee. Marion stopped turning. She turned back. Oh, Simone, that's all the way across town. It's 20 minutes. We have reservations. I'm sick, Marion. A pause. I'm sure Ray can bring you something when we're done. Won't that be nice? She smiled. The coat. The door. Feel better, sweetheart? They took my husband to dinner. I ordered congee by delivery for the second time in 2 days. I ate it alone in the dim bedroom with the television on low, and I thought very quietly, for a very long time, about what I had just learned. I called Angie on Monday. My voice was still rough. She picked up on the 4th ring. Simone, are you feeling better? The cake was, well, we ended up just getting something from the grocery store. It was fine, don't worry about it. How did the party go? I asked. Good, great. Mia had a wonderful time. A pause. Did you need something? Did you need something? I had been lying in bed for 3 days, sick and alone, and she was asking if I needed something as if I were a stranger who had called at an inconvenient time. No, I said. I just called to check in. Oh, well, I'm actually just running out the door. Of course, talk soon, Angie. I hung up. I lay back against the pillow. The room was very quiet. I thought about the soup I had made when Ray had his back injury 2 winters ago. Bone broth, slow-simmered for 8 hours. I drove to 3 different stores to find the right bread. I thought about the meals I'd brought over when Marion had her hip replacement. A week's worth, labeled stackable containers, heating instructions written out by hand. I thought about staying up until midnight the week Angie's husband traveled for work, so she could have a night to herself, her children asleep in our guest room. I thought about all of it. I cataloged it. Then I got up, showered for the first time in 4 days, made myself my favorite chamomile tea, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time doing nothing except thinking. The change was not dramatic. That's the part that surprised me later, how undramatic it was. I didn't make a proclamation. I didn't stage a confrontation. I simply stopped. I stopped making the elaborate dinners. Ray got pasta. Ray got a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, pulled apart, served with salad, functional, edible, nothing that required 45 minutes of my attention and returned 11 minutes of his. He noticed on the 3rd night. What happened to the... He gestured at his plate. Chicken and salad, I said. Right, but you usually... I didn't have time tonight. That was all. He ate his chicken. I ate mine. The following week, Angie called and asked if I could watch Luca and Mia on Friday afternoon. Something had come up. I'm not available Friday, I said, a brief silence. What do you mean? I have something to do. Simone, it's just a few hours. You're always home Friday afternoons. Not this Friday. Another silence. Longer, weighted with the particular indignation of someone who has never been told no. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. You'll figure something out, I said pleasantly. Hope it works out. I hung up. I went to the living room. I sat on the couch for 20 minutes doing nothing at all. It felt strangely like drinking water when you've been thirsty for so long you'd stopped noticing. There was a craft store 3 blocks from our house that I had walked past approximately 400 times without going in. I went in on Wednesday with no particular plan. I walked out with a student-grade set of watercolors, 2 brushes, a pad of cold-pressed paper, and a small ceramic dish for mixing. I had not painted since college. In college, I had been the person in the studio at 11 at night, completely lost in a piece, hours vanishing like smoke. I had loved it the way you love things before life tells you to be practical. And then I had been practical. And the brushes had gone into a drawer, and the drawer had closed, and I had married Ray and learned to make risotto. I set everything up on the dining room table on a Thursday afternoon while Ray was at work. I mixed a wash of cerulean blue. I watched the water carry it across the paper, pale at the edges, deeper at the center. I made a horizon. I made a sky. I painted for 3 hours. Time does something different when I paint. It doesn't drag or press. It simply passes, the way time passes when you are exactly where you are supposed to be. I thought, sitting there looking at my small, imperfect sky, I used to be this person. This person still exists. The intervention happened on a Saturday morning in May. I came downstairs to find Ray sitting at the kitchen table with his parents and Angie. Someone had made coffee. They were arranged in a way that was clearly arranged, chairs pulled out, hands folded, the specific posture of people who have rehearsed. I stood in the doorway in my robe and looked at them. "Sit down, Simone," Dave said, his boardroom voice. I sat. I got myself a cup of coffee first, deliberately, slowly. "We're worried about you," Marion said. She had the expression of someone attending a sad occasion. "I appreciate that," I said. "You've been different," Angie said. "Distant. I feel like we've done something to upset you." I held my coffee cup. "What specifically do you think you've done?" They exchanged a glance. "That's why we're here, to talk it through." "All right," I said. "I'll be direct then." I set down my cup. I noticed that I've been making elaborate dinners for Ray every night, not because I was asked, but because it was just expected. I noticed that when you come for dinner on Sundays, Marion, I cook for hours to make sure it's special, and the visits are never planned in advance, which means I'm improvising every time. I noticed that Angie, you bring the kids over when it suits you, without asking, and I watch them because I always have. I noticed I've been baking birthday cakes and driving across town and staying up late so everyone else's life runs smoothly. The kitchen was very quiet. "We're family," Ray said. His voice was careful. "That's what family does." "I know," I said. "I believe that." "So then, where were you when I was sick?" No one spoke. I had a fever of 102. I was in bed for 4 days. I asked Ray to get ibuprofen. He was too tired. I looked at Ray. He looked at the table. "Marion, you came over and I asked for soup from 20 minutes away and you said you had reservations." I looked at Marion. "Angie, I texted you on Saturday morning, the morning of Mia's party, to say I was sick and couldn't make the cake. You never responded. Not a text, not a phone call, not a feel better." "Simone," Angie started. "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant it. I was surprised to mean it. "I'm not telling you this to make anyone feel guilty. I'm telling you because I realized something while I was lying in that bedroom alone. I realized that the arrangement we have, that I give and you receive, that arrangement only works if everyone pretends it's generosity. The moment I needed something back, the arrangement showed its real shape." Dave cleared his throat. "We're all busy. It's not like we—" "I know," I said again. "That's the thing. You were busy. And when I'm busy cooking for 4 hours so Sunday dinner is nice, nobody counts that as busy. That's just what Simone does." A long silence. Marion reached across the table and patted my hand. "I hope now that we've talked this through, we can get back to normal." I looked at her hand on mine. "I hope so too," I said. Nothing got back to normal. Or rather, things continued in the new normal, which was me, present for my own life in a way I hadn't been in years. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center on Tuesday evenings. I started walking in the mornings, long routes through neighborhoods I'd never taken the time to explore, headphones in, no destination in particular. I read 4 books in May. I started keeping a small journal, nothing disciplined, just notes, things I noticed, colors I wanted to try, sentences that arrived in my head and didn't belong anywhere. I felt, cautiously, like someone who was being slowly reassembled. And then I found it. On a Tuesday night after class, falling down an internet rabbit hole about watercolor techniques, I came across the Fabriano Watercolor Festival, an international gathering in Bologna, Italy. Workshops, masters, painters from 40 countries, 5 days in July. I looked at it for a long time. I thought about all the reasons not to go. I was good at that. I had been trained for it. Ray would be upset. The timing was complicated. Who goes to Italy alone? What would people think? And then I thought about the bedroom, the 4 days, the soup Marion didn't bring, the phone Angie didn't answer. I booked it that night. Flight, hotel, festival registration. I didn't tell anyone. I told Ray on Thursday, 2 days before I was leaving on Saturday. I waited until after dinner, his pasta, which he had stopped commenting on, and I set the itinerary printout on the table between us. I'm going to a watercolor festival in Bologna, I said. I leave Saturday morning, 5 days. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. Something moved across his face. Surprise, then calculation, then the beginning of something that wasn't quite anger but was adjacent to it. Saturday, he said. This Saturday. Yes. Simone, you can't just... He stopped, restarted. Why didn't you say something sooner? I didn't know sooner, I said, which was not entirely true, but was true enough. My parents were going to come for dinner on Sunday. You can cook for them, I said, or you can take them to a restaurant. Either works. He was quiet. Then, this isn't like you. I know, I said. He called his mother Marion that night. I could hear the conversation through the bedroom wall, not the words, just the tone. His voice low and apologetic. Marion's rising in that particular register she had. I lay in bed and read my book and turned the pages and felt, beneath the guilt that had been trained into me over years, something that was quiet and steady and mine. Marion called me directly the next morning. Simone, Ray tells me you're going to Europe. Italy, yes. Alone? Yes. A pause designed to communicate the gravity of this. And you're leaving Ray to manage by himself? He's 34 years old, Marion. That's not the point. I think it might be, actually. Angie called an hour later. Same script, different voice. How could you? Ray needs you. This is so selfish. We don't even know who you are anymore. Dave left a voicemail. His boardroom voice turned toward disappointment, which was its most dangerous register. He hoped I would reconsider. He hoped I understood the example I was setting. I listened to the voicemail once. Then I finished packing. Bologna in July was terracotta and arcades and the smell of bread from doorways I'd never find again. I arrived on a Saturday evening, took a taxi from the airport through streets that felt ancient in the way that means not crumbling but rooted, and checked into a small hotel near the Piazza Maggiore with a window that looked onto a courtyard with a single lemon tree. I sat at that window for an hour after I arrived and did nothing except look at the lemon tree and listen to the city. I slept for 10 hours. I did not check my phone. The festival began Sunday morning at a studio space near the university. There were painters from everywhere. A retired schoolteacher from Brisbane named Helen, who painted in 10-minute bursts and said that was her discipline. A young man from Lagos called Emeka, who worked exclusively in indigo and ochre and could make light appear on paper in a way that seemed physically impossible. A woman from Quebec, Marguerite, who had given up a career in accounting at 47 to paint full-time and was, at 63, entirely without regret. I was introduced as an amateur. All the best people are amateurs, Marguerite said, not unkindly. It means you're doing it for love. Our first workshop was on wet technique. The instructor, a compact, precise man from Florence named Giancarlo, told us not to plan. Planning is control, he said. The water does not care about your plan. Let it go where it wants. Follow. I was not good at following. I had spent 4 years managing outcomes, managing expectations, smoothing every surface before anyone else had to feel a rough edge. I had planned menus and moods and family dinners. I did not know how to follow water. On my first sheet, I fought it. The result was muddy and tight. Colors that had been good individually strangled each other. "You're holding," Giancarlo said, standing behind me. "I know." What are you afraid will happen? I thought about that. That it'll be wrong. Wrong how? Just wrong. Not good. He was quiet for a moment. Wrong is not a thing that happens in watercolor. Only unexpected. Unexpected you can work with. Unexpected is interesting. He moved on. I looked at my muddy sheet. Then I took a new one. I loaded my brush with a deep violet and touched it to wet paper, and I let go of where it went. It bloomed. It branched. It did something I wouldn't have planned in 100 attempts. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I laughed. A short surprised sound, alone at my table in a room full of strangers. And no one found it strange. By the third day, I had stopped checking my phone in the morning. I ate breakfast alone each day at a cafe 2 streets from the hotel, cornetto and a cappuccino, the simple arithmetic of a morning that belonged entirely to me. I walked to the studio. I painted. I ate lunch with whoever happened to be nearby, which changed daily, and was always interesting and required nothing of me except presence. Marguerite and I shared a table most evenings. She had the particular freedom of a woman who had stopped apologizing for taking up space, and being near her felt instructive. "You seem like someone who is just starting to breathe," she said on the third night, over a plate of tagliatelle. "Is it that obvious?" Only because I was the same. She poured more wine without asking if I wanted it because she had noticed I always did. "What was it for you? Work? Marriage?" "Both," I said. "Neither, specifically. Just everything I'd agreed to without agreeing." She nodded. She understood the grammar of it. "And now?" "I'm in Bologna," I said, "eating pasta." She raised her glass. "There are worse revelations." I called Ray on the 4th night, not from obligation but because I wanted to, which surprised me. He answered quickly. "Simone? Hi." A pause. "How is it?" "Extraordinary," I said. And then, because it was true and because he was still my husband, and because I had not stopped loving him just because I had stopped disappearing for him. "I wish you could see it. The light here is unlike anything." He was quiet for a moment. "I made dinner Sunday. For my parents." "How did it go?" "Burned the chicken a little. Mom didn't say anything." "That's generous of her." A small sound that was almost a laugh. "Yeah." "Ray." I sat down on the bed. The courtyard below had the lemon tree, just visible in the dark. "Things are going to be different when I get back. I need them to be. I'm going to say so directly when I'm home. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you so you're not surprised." A long pause. "Okay," he said finally. His voice was careful. "We can talk." "We will," I said. "Good night." I hung up. I went to my window. The lemon tree was pale in the dark. I had grown up watching my parents' marriage disassemble. Not dramatically, not in one event, but slowly, like a garment losing its shape from being washed wrong too many times. They had separated when I was 9. I had understood nothing about it then except that it was permanent, and that permanent had weight. I had promised myself, somewhere in the wordless architecture of childhood, that I would never do that I would be the kind of wife who stayed, that I would be indispensable, necessary, woven so tightly into a family's fabric that there could be no dissolution. And I had done it. I had made myself indispensable by making myself invisible. I had confused being needed with being loved. Bologna was showing me something different. Bologna was showing me 5 days of being entirely myself, painting badly and then better, eating alone without embarrassment, laughing at my own surprised laughter. And the discovery underneath all of it was this. I was a person. I had been a person all along, not a function, not a caretaker, not the woman who made the risotto and the birthday cakes and the Sunday dinners that everyone consumed without counting the cost. A person, with a preference for violet washes and morning cappuccinos and the particular way light moved across wet paper. The fear of leaving, the fear I had carried like a stone since I was 9 years old, it did not disappear in Bologna. But it changed shape. I had always thought the choice was stay and be miserable, or leave and be terrible. What Bologna offered was a third option: stay and be fully yourself, and let the rest figure out its own shape. If they couldn't hold that, if Ray couldn't hold that, if the family couldn't hold that, then the marriage was already a different thing than I had believed it to be, and I would grieve it, and I would survive it. because I had just spent 5 days discovering that I could sit alone at a table in a foreign city and feel something that was not loneliness, but was unmistakably peace. My last morning in Bologna, I went to the studio alone before the others arrived. I sat up at my usual table. I mixed a wash of warm sienna, the color of the city's rooftops, from above. I worked in silence for an hour, and what emerged was not perfect. Watercolor is never perfect, that is the agreement you make, but it was true. It had the quality of something real. Giancarlo came in while I was finishing. He looked at it for a moment. "Different from your first day," he said. "I learned to follow the water." He smiled. "Most people take years." I was very motivated, I said. I came home on a Saturday. Ray was at the airport. He was holding nothing, no flowers, no sign, but he was there, which was more than I'd expected, and possibly more than he'd known how to manage. We drove home mostly quiet. Not an uncomfortable quiet, the quiet of two people recalibrating. "The house is clean," he said when we walked in. "I can see that." He stopped, started again. "I didn't want you to come home to a mess." I looked at him. He was holding the strap of my carry-on bag, slightly uncertain, standing in the hallway of the home I had kept for 4 years while he had received it as ambient fact. He was, I understood then, trying, clumsily, belatedly, without the vocabulary for it yet, but trying. "Thank you," I said. We sat at the kitchen table and I made tea, not because it was my job, but because I wanted tea. I made 2 cups. "I need to tell you some things," I said. "I know," he said. He wrapped both hands around his mug. "Go ahead. I'm not going to cook elaborate meals every night. I'm not going to be available for your family on their schedule. I'm not going to put myself last anymore. And I need you to understand that this is not a phase, and I need you to stand next to me on this, not behind me." Ray looked at his tea. "My mother is not going to be happy." "I know that." "She's going to say, 'Ray.'" I waited until he looked at me. "I need to know if you're in this with me. Not halfway. Not when it's convenient. Actually in it." A long moment. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car passed. "I should have gotten you the ibuprofen," he said. It was not the answer I had asked for, but I let it sit there between us, because it was at least true. "Yes," I said. "You should have." "I didn't think—" He stopped, rubbed his face. "When you started being different, I didn't know what I'd done, and then my mother was calling, and Angie was calling, and it just felt easier to let them handle it," I said. "Yeah." I watched him. He was doing the thing he always did when a conversation got uncomfortable, pulling back by degrees, small retreats, almost invisible, his hands wrapped around the mug, his eyes on the table. The slow withdrawal of a man who had learned that if he waited long enough, someone else would resolve the tension. That someone had always been me. "Ray, look at me." He did. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be present. Those are different things." I kept my voice level. "But I need you to understand something, and I need you to actually hear it." I paused. "I went to Bologna alone and I was fine. More than fine, so I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because I want to be. That's new, and it means the terms are different now." Something moved across his face, not quite understanding. The beginning of it, maybe. "Okay," he said. But his eyes had already shifted back to the table. I noted that. I noted it the way I had learned in 4 days of fever and silence, to note things clearly and without flinching. I loved my husband. I also knew, sitting across from him in the kitchen he had cleaned because I was coming home, that love was no longer going to be enough on its own. It would need to be accompanied by something sturdier, something that looked like action. He would try, or he wouldn't. I would watch, and I would know. And if the answer was wouldn't, I thought of Bologna, the lemon tree, Marguerite raising her glass, the sienna painting drying on the table while the city moved outside the window. I knew now, with a certainty I hadn't had before, that I could leave. That leaving would not make me my parents. That staying miserable was its own kind of damage, quieter, but just as real. I picked up my tea. It had gone slightly cold. "I'm going to paint tomorrow morning," I said. "The east light is good on Sundays." "Okay," Ray said again. I would be watching for the difference between the 2 times he said it. I didn't believe everything would be simple. I'm not someone who believes in simple, but I believed, watching him hold his mug with both hands in the kitchen that he'd cleaned because I was coming home, that there was something here still worth building. Something that might look different than what we'd had. Something that might be better if we were both willing to be honest about the shape of it. The following Tuesday, Angie called and said she needed me to watch the kids on Thursday. "I can't Thursday," I said, "but I could do a couple hours on Saturday morning if that works." A pause. "Well, I need Thursday." "I understand. I'm not available Thursday." "Simone, I don't—" "Angie." My voice was even, unhurried. "I care about Luca and Mia. I'm happy to help when I can, but I need notice, and I need it to work both ways, so if Saturday morning works, let me know by tomorrow." She hung up without saying goodbye. She called back on Wednesday to say Saturday worked. It was a small thing, the size of a pebble, but pebbles are what paths are made of. I paint on Tuesday evenings. I paint on Saturday mornings when the light comes through the east window at exactly the right angle. I have a small folding table I set up in the corner of the living room that is now, quietly, mine. On the wall above it, I hung the Sienna painting, Bologna's rooftops, the warm, impossible light of a city where I remembered myself. I am not finished being afraid. I am not finished negotiating the new shape of my life, the new language of my marriage, the continued education of a family that received generosity so long they forgot to call it that. There will be more conversations, more mornings where I have to say, clearly and without anger, "No, that doesn't work for me." More moments of watching someone's face rearrange itself in surprise, as if the word "no" from my mouth is a new sound they haven't categorized yet. But I will be there for all of it, present, not vanished into someone else's need. The risotto took 45 minutes. I know now what it costs to give someone 45 minutes of your full attention and have them barely notice. I know because I spent 4 years paying that cost, again and again, and absorbing the deficit without complaint until the deficit had a face, and the face looked like a bedroom ceiling on the 3rd day of a fever, and the face looked like my husband's car pulling out of the driveway, and the face looked like Angie's voicemail, and Marion's coat already on. I know now what it costs. And I know what it feels like when the cost is finally, quietly, entirely your own to decide. That risotto, I make it sometimes, still. For myself, occasionally for Ray, once for Marguerite when she came through in October, and stayed 2 nights in our guest room and sat at our kitchen table and talked until midnight. It takes 45 minutes. It requires full attention. It is, every time, worth it. The day I stopped disappearing was not dramatic. It was a Tuesday. It was a cup of tea, made for 2, on a morning I had decided to stay, not because I had to, but because for the first time I chose to. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe.